Hey everyone, John Henry here, slingshotfutures.com, and welcome to the Daily Futures Market Outlook, where we take a look at our major four markets and formulate an attack plan for tomorrow. Now, tomorrow is going on the 21st of the month, and really just kind of another good moving day. You know, overall, yesterday we had the same thing. Very little news on the docket. The market moved really well. Today, I was expecting to be either range-bound or continuation, and, well, we were range-bound for the morning session, but we did start picking up in the afternoon. So another low news day, or in this case, no news day, and some still pretty good movement. Now, tomorrow, two really big moving days back-to-back like that. A lot of times the market likes to take a little bit of a break. We'll have to see what happens on the third day, but overall, we may have a little bit of a slow one tomorrow, unless they want to keep this this train going. Now, before we jump on in, as always, make sure to swing it over to slingshotfutures.com. Scroll down and click on the Join the Daily Outlook newsletter. That's going to let you sign up your email address so that we can send you a message every time one of these videos comes out. Along with that, in that email, we're going to talk about all kinds of different stuff between stocks, cryptocurrencies, options, you name it. It's probably going to be in there at some point or another. So a great newsletter to have your hands on. At the bottom of the page in the blog section, we have the live trading morning prep levels. We post those every morning right before the live trade room opens up, and those are going to be the major levels of support and resistance for that day. And then we have the market psychology video or a trade of the day video from the room that we post as well, just kind of giving us a refresher on what happened that day so we can keep and learning, learn as much as we can and retain that information so we can get better and better. If you haven't done so already, make sure to click on the live trade room subscription and trial info. That's going to let you sign up for a one-day trial so you can sit down with us in the live trade room, see what we're all about, see how we handle each and every day and each and every trade. You'll see it right in front of you live on my charts, and you'll be able to kind of, ask some questions and just kind of sit down and enjoy yourself. Obviously, if it's your first time in the room, you may not know everything that's going on, but it's a really interactive community and just a great trade room to have you in. So make sure to sign up for that if you haven't done so already. Taking a look in the euro, for the most part, range-bound most of the morning session, given yesterday's drop lower into the range. Not really a big surprise, but they did end up breaking down for a little more continuation. This breakdown that we're getting right now, we have a wide open target down at 11,564, and arguably we do have a little bit of a smaller target. If we take this range and draw it up as a kind of a deviation of itself down, you can see that we're floating right around that same area. So it's not a surprise to see them coming into a little bit of support inside of here, just given the overall range-bound sentiment. We have a strong range, we're looking for that range to continue, and we could be looking for those deviations down. They've only missed that low by a few ticks. So if that does break down again, we may have a third deviation, but overall we have the major wide open objective down at 11,564, and that may mean that we front run another level, except this time a little bit more aggressively before they get down to those lows. Either way, we have the sellers in tune with the market. They're selling pretty much everything they can get their hands on, so that's what we're looking to do as well. We want to find an area of interest that we can sell into. Now, depending on the type of area that we're looking for, that could be a lot of different things, right? That could be continuation to the downside for a big breakout lower. That could be a little bit of a slower grind down. It all depends on what the market really wants to do. But at this point in time, we're looking to sell. We just need a place to sell at. The levels that I'm really looking for, I would love to see a retest of that earlier range low. 11,956 would be beautiful, but that's a pretty far move up for us to get a correction if we're going to keep going down. So although I would love to sell at that price, I don't necessarily know that I would want to sell it there now if it comes back up. I would have rather sold back here. So at this point in time, we have the option to sell right there at 11,955, but we could also look for something like this where we get a breakdown, a pullback, and then a drive lower to finish off that objective to the downside. Either way, though, we're looking to sell. It just depends on what the market wants to give us to work with. Over on the gold market, gold for the most part just kind of stuck in a wedge. We really haven't gone anywhere on the daily. We opened up over here. We're going to be closing right around here. And on the daily chart, that is going to be a fairly heavy bear candle. Most of the wick on the highs, a little bit of the wick on the lows, and that is a bear body inside of here. So for the most part, the sellers defended the highs pretty aggressively. Now, zooming out a little bit, we can see that goes right along with the trend. Makes perfect sense to see that kind of defense coming in. But now we're seeing a little bit of a wedge again. We just continue to get stuck here. Every time the sellers are trying to get through the lows, they fail. We had the new low, they tried it, failed it. had a big correction up. The sellers saw that as an opportunity to fire sale it, right, and drive that market right back down. But then we hit the lows again, and they really couldn't get much through there again. It's kind of a rinse and repeat. So with this downside bias, that's giving us a clue that we may just end up going into a little bit more of a sideways kind of range to a slight downward bias, which means that we don't want to sell too low. We have to be very careful selling too low so we don't get stuck in that failed breakout to the downside. Now, the overall momentum that we have going right now is still obviously down, so selling is on the picture. I would love to sell it around 45.9 to 46.7. And of course, if this does turn into a range, then we have the highs of the range potential to sell at around 47.9 up to 48.6. The big last level of support that the buyers have in the way, this is their last line of defense right there at 43.1. If the sellers can break through that, we're very likely going to see that break down through a new low, and then potentially even continuation to go along with that bigger trend. But overall, the downside bias is what we're looking for. We're looking for selling opportunities. I would prefer to sell a little bit higher if possible, just so that we don't get suckered in to selling the overall low of the move. Switching over to crude oil. Now, crude oil had a pretty big move today. Now, that said, if you were in here early in the morning, you probably didn't see a whole lot of that. But, you know, right around 6 o'clock or so, big dive down. And that opens up a major objective to the downside at 42.76. So we have some unfinished business to go for the sellers to kind of push their way back down, get what they're looking for to finalize that objective. But a couple things in the way. This is obviously bearish, right? I don't think we need to really state that one. It's obviously bearish. But the one thing that really kind of comes out here is that we have an opportunity to try to find better prices. It's obvious that sellers don't want to sell low, because if that were the case, we would have seen more breakouts like these. But we're not getting them. They're getting weaker and weaker and weaker. Notice how these lows are getting higher and higher, basically. I mean, they're making lows, but they're not going as far, right? So with that weakness, and now we're catching a big reversal up, we could be looking for an ABCD type pattern to the upside, looking for selling pressure right where all of that kind of the initial sell drive down subsided and where the secondary sellers came in. A retest of that area would be a phenomenal selling area around 43.70 to 81. Love to sell around there. If we can get a slightly better price, 44.02 and then 44.31, chances are we're probably not going to get that if we are going to go back down to the lows. Either way, though, wide open objectives to the downside, looking to sell at potentially better prices. If they don't give us those prices and we get something like this where it collapses down, then we're looking to jump on in right there, just assuming that the sellers are still too aggressive to let it pull back even to a respectable pullback area. And then finally on the S&P. Now the S&P has had a pretty range-bound start to the day, and by pretty range-bound I mean horrendously range-bound. I mean it literally went nowhere from 6 o'clock yesterday p.m. all the way until about 8 in the morning. Once we started opening up, though, we got a beautiful drive to the downside and really good continuation overall. Really hard to disagree with the overall downside momentum that we're seeing here. Now, the big thing that we're dealing with is the fact that you can kind of see how this is becoming parabolic. See how it's kind of angling steeper, steeper, steeper. Whenever that type of movement happens, it tends to be a parabolic move, and parabolic moves tend to come with a very steep correction. That is the major concern that I have right now, is that, yes, I want to sell. This is obviously a bearish market right now, but it's getting a little bit too strong, right? When one side puts too much emphasis on it, they run out of ammo to defend it when it starts coming back. And that's where you start getting that heavy correction where all the sellers start realizing, oh, I need to get out. They get out, and then more sellers get out, and more sellers get out, and you get that deep correction, and then they start reloading because it's at a better price. And that's kind of the situation that we're finding ourselves in right now. We haven't seen the massive signs of exhaustion yet, but we are starting to get some clues of them with that parabolic curve to the downside. I think maybe one more leg lower would make a lot of sense into that weekly support, would be nice at around 24.34.5. And we have a selling area, this earlier wedge breaking down. That's also a major 60-minute resistance area, 24.37.5 or so, looking to cycle that back down to the lows. But I'm not really pushing a whole lot on a new low that ends up breaking down aggressively, not like we've seen more recently. Again, those signs of exhaustion, seeing the sellers running out of steam a little bit. So really, I'm just looking to sell inside here or up at 42.25, 44 even, and then look to retest those lows for a double bottom or triple bottom, depending on what happens here. Either way, though, I'm not expecting a huge low. Really just want to sell, and I want to sell at some better prices. Right now, we're sitting on top of a potential sell area for the short term. In the long term, see if we can get that deeper correction in the overnight. Maybe we can get some better looking moves on the way down. So that's going to do it for the outlook. Now, in terms of, the news for tomorrow, there's not really a whole lot going on, but we do have some news, at least for the U.S. session this time. Obviously, tomorrow being Wednesday, we have the crude oil inventories at 10:30, and the API for that is coming out in about 15 minutes, so make sure to catch up on the API report. At 10 o'clock tomorrow, we have the existing home sales forecasted at a positive 5.55 million. The previous was 5.57, so not looking for much of a difference there. And then for the crude oil inventories, they're forecasted at a negative 2.106 million. The previous was negative 1.66. So that's really the outlook. That's kind of what we're looking for tomorrow. Could be a little bit of a choppy one. We saw that this morning. Once it finally opened up, it got going, but you gotta play it safe. Like we always say, make the plan, trade the plan, follow those rules. We'll be okay. Until next time, we'll see y'all then.